Test.
Okay, I'd like to open the Public Works Committee meeting for Wednesday, February 21st. I'd like to start with the open forum for anybody who has anything they'd like to bring up that's not on the agenda here today. And seeing that there is no one available for that, we'll move on to the next one then. The next point is to approve the minutes from the January meeting. Are there any questions or any amendments that you want to do to it or anything? If not, I'd ask for a motion to approve that.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved then. The next is to have the city bond information review. And Jenny, can you help us with that?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Give me one moment. Hopefully, who's online? Cam, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Good evening again. Nice to see everybody. It's been a few months since I've been here at one of your meetings, so hope everyone is doing well. Tonight I have an update for the committee regarding some funding and debt service information. If you recall, I was here back in August and provided some information, but with the time between conversations, some of that can get lost in the shuffle. And we'll also provide an update on some of the work that Tom and I have been working on with respect to the bond. So we'll just go through some of this. I'm happy to send this out to everyone. If you would like a copy, we can definitely do that. And we will get started here. There we go. Excellent. Okay, so we'll just start with a high-level overview of some of the various sources of income as we were looking at issuing a bond for the upcoming road project. So I have a little bit of additional information from the last time. So we talked about that our general fund levy is one way that we can generate revenue for paying off or for paying for a road bond project. Currently in our operating budget, we have a line item of $59,000 that's earmarked to go towards a bond payment. What we've been doing for the last handful of years is we've been putting that money into a money market account. And currently we have $1.2 million in that. So the $59,000 isn't the only money that has been going into that account. I think there were some other sources of revenue over a period of time, but right now that's what we have identified. So there's a good chunk of money in that account to use towards future road projects. We also, as we know, have some debt service bonding opportunities, general obligation street reconstruction bonds, and general obligation improvement bonds. Depending on the types of improvement projects we need to complete, our bond counsel will help us with which type of bonding would be most appropriate and help us through that process. Part of that is identifying the initial list of roads that Tom and our city engineer have been working on, and what types of improvements within those road projects would we be looking at. And then they would identify which bonding mechanism we would use for that. You might recall in August, I mentioned that there was a new Small Cities Assistance Fund that was created by the legislature in 2023. Nisswa's allotment for that from that fund for 2024 was just under $88,000, and it was a new ongoing permanent funding for cities under 5,000 population. There is an existing account for cities above 5,000 in population, but nothing dedicated for the 5,000 and under. This was just a summary of the historical funding where you can see, I think based on the given year, we'll put some money into this fund or we won't, depending on the budget impacts. Unfortunately, we will not likely be getting that money in 2024. So we have unfortunately budgeted for it, and we're going to have to adjust that out. I found out last week with the legislative session that kicked off You might know that the state is operating with a budget deficit forecast right now, and in doing so, they need to balance the budget, and this is one of those revenue streams that they have chosen to use to help balance that. So right now, what I've been been told is that this funding would re-engage in 2026. We're hoping to get this reinstated as promised, but right now there's no guarantee with that. So I think at this point we'll have to take that one off the table as far as an option. Local government aid, we talked previously about the fact that Nisswa does not receive LGA based on our tax base. Our 2023 estimated market value, 1.2 billion. In 22 is that first year where we exceeded the $1 billion marks. We have significant growth we've seen over the last handful of years in our tax base. I include information on LGA formula basics if we're interested, but since Nisswa doesn't receive any and hasn't since 2008, we'll just continue on with that. Assessments. I know that Councilmember Utzinger will talk to the committee tonight regarding assessments. The idea with an assessment is to offset the cost of the taxpayer through the overall debt service burden that we would impose by issuing a bond. It must pass a special benefit test. There's calculations to ensure that the benefit that the property owner receives, that there's a formula and a balance there as far as then what they're paying for that. It's becoming increasingly difficult to uphold assessments in court, or they're being challenged more frequently. And it does add time and complexity to projects. And that's not to paint a negative picture on assessments. It's just to be aware of that it's more complicated and there's more nuance to that. So something to be aware of. And as I mentioned, Councilmember Utzinger will talk a little bit more about assessments specifically. Local option sales tax. In August, I spoke to the committee regarding a task force that had been created at the end of the last legislative session to look at local option sales tax, and their task was to present a report to the legislative tax chairs in January of this year. They also, the legislature also enacted a moratorium on sales tax for a 2-year period, so the 24 and the 25 sessions. Previous requests of information from the Department of Revenue for Nisswa at a 0.5% sales tax would generate about $400,000 a year. So a significant number, and definitely a worthy option for us when thinking about what types of revenue streams we would consider. I believe I mentioned I was on the task force, and so I spent a lot of time between August and January working on this with the other members of the committee. We completed our report in February of 24. And some of the high-level recommendations was that we spent a lot of time and effort identifying projects that would be eligible for a local sales tax that would not need to go to the legislature for approval. So right now the process is you have your project that you would like to use a local sales tax for. You go to the legislature to get their approval for that, and then you would bring that request to your local voter to approve whether or not that would move forward. Trying to streamline some of that process and understanding that the legislature doesn't always use the same rationale for what projects they want to approve or not. Trying to come up with a consistent set of parameters was one of the task force tasks to get done. Something that was very clear in the process was they didn't want to, the expectation was that we should not be looking at what we would consider standard city services being provided. So one, nothing from an operations perspective. This wasn't to supplement our police department budget, for example. It was to look at capital projects only. And then even within that, not including projects that would be standard city services. So mostly roads were off the table. Not that that can't change in the future, but that's really been the sense of the legislature, that they don't want to see roads being a part of the sales tax option. And we had a lot of discussion around regionally significant projects because sales tax is generated from both local and not local contributors. And so what's the benefit to the area at large as opposed to just something that would be specific to one community? So just at a high level, some of the major parameters and recommendations that the report outlines is to allow a maximum of 1% local sales tax for city projects. So you could implement one project that imposed a 1% sales tax, or you could implement two projects at 0.5% each, or however you want to slice that. It's basically just you have up to a maximum of 1%. And then the projects that were identified for regional significance are listed here on the slide: libraries, airport, parks and trails, regional sports complexes, regional community centers, and criminal justice facilities. And within each one of those categories has a definition of regionality so that you would have something to point to and say, does this meet the criteria? As we talked a lot about, for example, community centers, that can range quite a bit. What does a community center mean from one community to the next? And so we wanted to set some kind of parameters to at least give some guidance, and that gets really difficult when you think of metro and greater Minnesota and small city and large city, and it's just that was difficult, but we at least came up with some things. All for the legislature to consider. I know that they are looking at this, and we hope that they will implement the recommendations by the task force. We'd like to see them implement all of them, but if nothing else, some of them. And also to lift the moratorium for 2025 is the goal, so that for cities that have projects, we can start to re-engage in this conversation again. And that's not to say, just as one more comment on the sales tax, that's not to say that because, let's say, roads aren't on this list, if there's an opportunity to generate sales tax for something else that the city does, that would offset. We have then, increased capacity and revenue for something like roads, then we can kind of do that. That shifting is something else to consider too. So as far as debt service, our debt service limit is 3% of the city's estimated market value. That equates to, on a $1.2 billion tax base, that equates to $37 million. Currently, our debt service balance at December 31st, 2023 is just under $6.5 million. So based on the numbers, we have a lot of additional capacity to issue debt if we would be inclined to do that. I have here listed just from our final 2023 pay 2024 levy, our general property tax levy, that's for all of our department operations. In the middle there are 3 of our 4 current bond issuances for our general fund. We have an abatement bond that doesn't get a separate line item above, so I have outlined that below, so it gets a little bit odd. That was just how it was set up many years ago. But maybe the interesting piece of information here is just to share with the committee that our 2018 street bond accounts for 50% of our total debt service cost in 2024. So our debt service payments, the $277,000 is our street reconstruction bond from 2018. So out of those 4 bonds that I listed on the other slide, here you can see that we have 3 of them that are going to be rolling off of our schedule here in the next couple of years. So we will be making a final payment on our abatement bond in December of 24. And then we'll have a final payment just coming due the next 2 months later in February of 25, and then one more a year later in February of 26. So we will have some increased capacity, about $500,000 worth of overall debt service payments that will be rolling off of our schedules and allowing for us to bring on additional debt service for roads. Now, it's not the only project that the city is considering, and so that's a question for the council, but for you to be aware of that we do have some other projects that are in ongoing conversations. We have some land acquisition conversations we're having, other infrastructure needs, potentially a new lift station. maybe other significant infrastructure projects. And that way, I'm looking at a pickle building, a new building for that. Now that could be a revenue bond, so that may not be for a general obligation bond, but it's good to be aware that we're looking at building something like that. That's significant. City Hall improvements, we've talked about how and when some of the timing comes with some of these, a little bit to be determined, but for the committee's awareness that while we do have about $500,000 in payments coming off of our schedule in the next couple of years, there may be other things too that will need to work into this debt schedule. And those are conversations we've had with our financial advisors about starting to work all of those things together. I went through some of this information last year. I won't go through it again unless there's some, significant interest in, but I can provide this information. It's just a breakdown of general fund revenues, expenditures, showing that, I guess I'll just highlight that our debt service is 14% of our overall general fund expenditure categories. And then I just have some market value information here. Our seasonal, recreational, and our commercial breakdown between, from year over year is very consistent. So I just had that information. Sometimes we're interested in that. Here's our market value. You can see the increase in that valuation that's increased over the last 5 years, where we exceeded that $1 billion mark in 22, and it has kept growing. I don't know if Tom will speak to this, but I'll just highlight that part of the work that's been done since your last meeting is working with our financial advisors to develop an initial debt service schedule based on the initial list of roads that Tom and our city engineer have put together. That is something we want to make sure we have a good handle on, and we're looking at potentially a couple options of doing that, either one big bond issuance or splitting it up into two. I think we have some roads that are, I'll say, more ready to go, and some that need some more work and some time and some conversations. And so does that make sense to split that out? The other consideration for us right now is that the interest rate is higher, actually significantly higher right now than any of our existing debt service. And is there a consideration for that to say, well, should we do a smaller portion of it to see maybe what happens with rates in a year or two? I'm happy to answer questions, and I will be here for other conversation as well. And I am, again, happy to share this information if it's helpful to the committee at any time.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Does anyone have any questions right now for Jenny at all? What was gone over?
I was wondering what that current moratorium on taxes, what does that mean? Said like for 2 years?
Yes, so what that means is that cities could, prior to June of 2023, they could petition the legislature to enact a local sales tax. So we could create our own sales tax that would then generate money to pay for a project that we wanted to accomplish in the city. So those things you typically would then go from the legislature to the voter for a referendum to approve that. And what the legislature said was, you are not allowed to even come ask for that anymore. We will not consider anything until we determine and come up with some more structured way to evaluate what projects should be allowed using local sales tax. Because they were seeing anything from environmental improvements to community centers, to airports, to roads in some cases. And it was just sort of all over the place. And I think at the end of the day, it just came down to which lobbying efforts were most successful for a community and maybe who had the most money to put into pitching their project. And that's not really the best way to do that. There should be some objective criteria for that.
Sure. Jenny, who was on that task force? It was like city administrators and engineers. Was there some legislators that were part of that too?
There were no legislators were on the task force. So Paul Marquardt, the Commissioner of Revenue, was on the task force. He was the chair. Myself as a representative of the League of Minnesota Cities. There was a representative from the League of Minnesota Counties. And then there were 4 public members. There was someone from the city of Moorhead. There was someone from Hospitality, Minnesota. There was a former Department of Revenue analyst, retired analyst. And then there was someone from a nonprofit in the metro. I don't remember offhand, but so there were 7 members with the task force.
And outstate Minnesota was represented. I mean,
I
they,
would say by
Of
myself
course.
and by Moorhead, the representative from Moorhead, yes, yes.
I believe you had up on there that there are some items that may not require legislature approval for a tax.
Yes.
What would those be?
So those would be the libraries, regional libraries, airports.
Oh, those, that you had
That
list
list there,
there?
yes, yes.
Okay.
So, yep. Parks and trails, community centers, regional sports complexes, and criminal justice.
And that would
facilities.
not have to go through the legislature.
Correct.
We could unilaterally put it on if the council approves it or something? or-
You have to go to the voter. The voter has to still, in all cases, has to go to the local
Okay.
voter for approval. But for those criteria, what the idea would be is you'd say, I have this project, it meets the criteria. You would submit it to the state auditor's office for them to just verify, yes, we meet the criteria. They sign off on it, and then you just work through your election process for that sales tax. So,
So the ones that go through the legislature are almost everything else. It's just those. were
yes,
the
you
ones
could
that were
still
not.
petition the legislature for anything. I mean,
Okay.
you could, if you wanted to, but the idea was to maybe take a little bit of that burden and time. From then, I don't know if the group knows, 2 years ago, the legislature, because they couldn't come up with a budget, they just didn't approve any of the requests. And so everyone had to come back for a second time. And that just isn't efficient.
So can you condense in just a few words what possible positive sources we have for sales tax or any tax? The city.
Do you mean more like revenue stream options for the
yeah.
city? I mean, I would say that the most significant chunk is just going to be our levy capacity. I think that's, not that there's not other options, but for example, that funding that we were going to receive that now we don't have at this time still is just a slice of the bigger piece that we're talking about based on the cost for the roads that we're looking to do. So
So
general
cur-
levy.
Currently, we have that every year, 59,000 we're putting away, and it's around 1.2 million or so. So that is there,
Yes.
but is that just for that's not just for the roads though. That's for various things, right?
No, that's just for roads.
Oh, just for roads, okay.
Just for roads, yes. If the council chooses, there isn't anything legally binding or, anything formal aside from we've just had this account. I know we've been putting money into it for roads, so I think it's fair to say a significant portion of that is for roads, but we would have to engage the council in saying, let's use this money for roads. And whether that's to,
So we could use that for the bonds for the roads.
certainly could, yes.
Any other questions?
If you think of anything else, I will be just over there, so.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Okay, so then, the next item on here is for the Road Bond Assessment Council update. Last meeting, Joe and I said that we would contact or talk with the council. I did that at the last meeting. Well, the previous meeting. And basically the response that I got was that this came up before when we were putting road bonds together. And there was a lot of angst amongst the Nisswa residents. And so basically the answers that I got from the people currently on the city council was a no with some exceptions such as going beyond the Nisswa standards of roads. If they wanted something special beyond what we have as a standard, then we should be able to charge for that. But it basically was a no other than that standard. The other was basically no. And then the third one was basically a hell no.
Where did you get this information?
Directly from the city council when I was on the, at our meeting.
From the meeting. people
Yeah,
that-
from the meeting. I asked them at the time and one person was not there. And so I talked to him individually and he didn't really have an opinion. He was just sort of, he wasn't really familiar with it and just didn't really know. But basically there are three that will say no. So at a minimum. So I'm thinking that really we are only looking at bonds at this time. And part of the reason that they, I heard was, there was a lot of pushback, first of all, but the other thing is that, some of the things that I heard is that it's basically if you put on an assessment, it can turn out to be a problem in that, some people will say, well, this person drives down my road, I'm getting assessed on that, why can't we also include them? Or it's basically like a double tax, you know, you're getting the general levy tax and then plus the assessment on top of that. It might not be 100%, but there's more that way. And it's also what Jenny had mentioned up there, that it is getting more and more difficult. People will challenge it and it's harder to hold it up in court. Plus, in addition, you will also have to do surveys, feasibility studies that cost money as well. And I heard a number around 70,000 or so to do that. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but
Yeah, unfortunately, I would
yeah,
look to Joe to get that. answer.
yeah, it's be from Joe, but that's the number I sort of heard bantered around.
Could be right.
So rather than do that, go straight with the bond. And if we try to do it the other way, we could certainly do so. We could certainly recommend it. But I really don't think, I think we'll probably be spinning our wheels if we try that. So I sort of recommend that we consider strictly bonding at this point. If the number for the, like was said, if the number for one bond is too much, we could split it into two bonds. And that might help to spread it out a little bit more. Currently, right now, I believe, if I calculated it right, we have about 4 million in bonds right now. That will be coming up within the next 3 years or so, 2 or 3 years. That should be finished. So that will help us as well. And then we have the 1.2 million in 4 roads right now. So that's basically what I wanted to mention here. After asking that, I think we probably just better consider bonds.
So I did have a comment. It was kind of based on some of what Jenny had said and some of what you had said. With interest rates being as high as they are right now, to me, it would make more sense to use that 1.2 million that we have already in the bank, or in bonds that we can pull out. But to not look at taking out another bond right now with interest rates as high as they are and fix whatever roads you can for that 1.2 million. I don't know how far that gets us.
About a sixth of the way.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know I don't know how long those bonds go out for. How many years do those go out for?
I can, so right now, we're having it suggest to us that should be 20 years, the next one. But I believe we've been doing them for 7. So we're still working on that with our consultant. And I'm hoping with the next month's meeting that we'll have a clearer picture of what that will look like. I suspect that we would probably shrink that down to maybe more like a 10-year bond.
What type of interest rates are you seeing? If we were to take out a bond now, what type of interest rates would we be looking at being saddled with for 10 years?
About 5%.
Ouch.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that when we just got a preliminary run from our consultant late last week. So we're looking at that. I'm going, boy, I don't think any of our existing debt service is more than, 2, maybe a little over 2. So we get obviously, used to that being a government entity. So 5 is a significant difference. And then seeing the initial debt service run for the 20 years, as Tom mentioned, is a much different approach than the last bond at 7 years. So there's somewhere in the middle where we can maybe make that work a little better, because I don't think that it makes a lot of sense to run it that long. But just have to work through.
What did you say, the interest rates might be roughly?
5%?
5%.
Yeah, at least as of now, based on a run as of now, yes, yes.
I mean, to me, I think it should be more of a triage type thing. We take care of the absolute worst roads that we can right now until interest rates hopefully go down. I just would hate to see us get saddled for 10 years with something that if we waited a year or 2 years, we could get back down to a 3%. This is a significant amount of money.
It's something I think we'll ask our financial advisor if he can, how good is his crystal ball to say,
Right.
are we looking at it, even if it's a year, it's probably reasonable to wait.
Yep.
If 2 or 3 or more, then we're gonna get into that situation where we're stretching the roads too far. But no, it's a great question.
Well, I understand what he's saying on taxes, but personally, I don't see how the city can not do something. I mean, our roads now are, so many of them are in such poor shape already. You let that go another couple of years and all you do is multiply the cost and you don't really gain anything.
Right, so if we kind of work our way into this timeline discussion, Kiki, I don't know if you can find that under the February meeting.
Okay, so we'll head into the timeline discussion at this point.
Yeah.
Let's do that,
Yeah,
yeah.
it'll kind of work its,
So, Mr. Chair, before we go forward, that
Mhm.
what I'm hearing from you is a pretty absolute no on assessments,
Correct,
at least in the foreseeable future.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's go ahead with that then.
so kind of to Dill's point about the roads being
Yeah.
to the point where we have to fix some high interest rates or not. I would say that's a pretty fair statement. There's very few that could really be stretched out very far. And what ends up happening is it becomes catastrophic at some point,
Mhm.
where they just, we have that bad winter or something and they just really go right out of,
Yeah.
they're just shot. And one of the examples we have of that is Grandview. The roads running through Grandview now, myself and Dave Reese with Woodseth met with Grandview to begin talking about those roads, what we're gonna do, what can we do, and they're worried about the impact to their business of having the roads closed for a period of time. And so they're asking us, how long can we stretch this out? And yet, at the same time, some of their staff calls us to complain that the roads are crap.
Yeah,
And we're getting complaints from residents both on East and West Linden too, of the condition of the road.
Hmm.
So there's a balancing act there. They would like us to go out to 2027 or something and be in the second bond if we're gonna break the bond up. And I think they should probably be in that second one to give them some time to prepare for that. But I would think, if we pull that out to 26 or 27, that road is really, really gonna get tough. And we're gonna be spending a ton of money on cold patch trying to keep it together. That's what we'll have to do. But I think if we're to try to wait out interest rates, there's no guarantee that they'll go down either. Now they could, the 2 and 3% that we were paying was probably an anomaly. Fantastic rates. I mean, some of the financial people that I've listened to may never see those kind of interest rates again. And so, yes, 5% seems high and it is relative to what we were paying, but could it end up going higher than that? I don't know. What we don't want to do is get so far behind the road that we're forced to do it with, say, if interest rate was go to 7% or 8%.
Mhm.
Or we have, in order to keep up with our cycle, we have to do 7.5 miles of road at each
Mhm.
segment on our cycle. So that's basically every 7.5 years, we have to do 7.5 miles.
Tom,
Yes.
just what is it that they need time to do before?
So what's happening with them is they're finding that their busy season is becoming year round.
Okay,
So they're telling me there's no good time for road construction to happen. So the only thing that they can do is if they know far enough out in advance, they may not book as much, or maybe they offer discounts. I don't know. That's
Yeah.
internal for them. For us, we're gonna do the road when we can. It has to be obviously somewhere between May and October.
right.
And usually our projects fall later into the fall. It's just how Nisswa seems to shake out. That's when we become a priority. As most of you know, we really have one, maybe two main contractors do paving. And so we're a little bit at their mercy too, as far as what schedules can be worked out. Now, they're very efficient. I thought, for instance, you know, they didn't think the roundabout project went all that good.
Who
Or
didn't?
or it interfered with their business quite a bit.
Who didn't?
Grandview.
You're kidding.
And to me, that was one of the smoothest projects I've ever seen.
Yeah.
There was no weather. I mean, we had no weather at all last summer.
Yeah.
So for construction, there were no delays whatsoever, but it still impacted their business. I don't doubt that it did, you know, there's certain people who, the site of construction is like, they can't deal with it. And that's what they saw.
Well, that street that goes by the new hotel there, I forget what, I don't know the name of it.
Yeah, so the one that goes in front of their new,
Yeah, that is terrible.
yeah,
I mean, that isn't even a street. And people are walking down that and I mean, there's no good sidewalks, there's nothing. That's a terrible mess.
so we're trying to, from the city standpoint, we're trying to do more improvements than just resurfacing through there. We want to fix up the drainage so that the pavement lasts significantly longer. We want to raise the tonnage that the road carries to help keep it from breaking up. We want to look at widths so it's easier to maneuver through there. We want to improve the sidewalks, trails, and lighting if we can with Grandview's help to try to keep people off the streets more if possible, make it more comfortable and convenient for them to be on the trails as they're intended. That's gonna require some engineering and some thought of how to make that better. Curb and gutter is one of the things, that we would like to add where we can to deal with drainage. That's been a sticking point with Grandview in the past. I think going forward, they might be more open to that idea, but that's what we need to really make the streets last,
Yeah, it's
to get
flat.
closer to that 30-year cycle that we need.
It's flat up there. You gotta put in some draining.
And so there's a lot of issues there to work through.
Has there been any discussion with them, as far as them maybe contributing partly to this?
I have talked to them, you know, just like Mark was talking about with the assessments, anything over and above our road standard
Yeah,
could be assessed. So in my eyes, and what I see is over and above are the things like the trails, some of the signage that they would like to see to help their guests find their way around. That stuff I expect Grandview to pay for. What I don't know is if those costs can be built into the bond and then they're just paying us for the bond, or if they have to go about that separate and it's just timed with our project. These are things that I have to find out with the help of the city engineer.
in
Once-
reality, those roads are probably used, what, 75% by Grandview and 25 by the rest of the people, maybe less.
10.
10 and 90, yeah. So, you know, it just seems to me there's a little more, there should be a little more leverage there, or some way probably there isn't, but
Those roads are all public roads, correct? They're not.
They are city streets.
So if they're city streets, don't we have full say of whether we're putting in curb and gutter?
Well, we adopted a standard
Yes.
last fall.
I mean, I don't understand why they have an input on a city street.
More
I don't have an
history than
input on
anything
what's
else.
going on out here.
No, they don't. You know, anytime you have a large stakeholder, you do have to, bring them in on the project. You know, you can't just steamroller them, even if that is our standard. I agree that we should stick to it. But I think we have some obligation to explain to them what the standard is and try to get them to have buy-in with that. And we're actually probably gonna be needing some cooperation from them too, because where do we take the stormwater? Well, probably on the property they own. They currently,
But their traffic is causing most of the wear and tear on roads.
it is.
That's why it seems to me there ought to be some way for them to be involved in payment.
Yeah, and I think they might, and I think that they're not, they haven't said no. Right now, you know, you and I have dealt with this a lot more than they have as far as the planning part of it. Grandview also has a lot of new faces on their management staff, so where in years past, we could have moved this along a little further. There's more faces involved in the decision.
Who do you deal with these days?
So there's, I apologize, the names.
Well, that's,
are a little bit
I'm-
rough for me, but you know, there's a handful of new people.
They're all new ones, huh?
And, or one that I haven't met
CEO.
before.
And then the old guard is gone, I assume.
Yes, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm looking to improve all these things around the street with it too, so it's coordinated.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of why I want them to have buy-in. I want to explain it to them, what we want to do, why it makes sense. And I think they're open to that. But one, we need to put more engineering into it to say for sure what their expenses are gonna be, where the water's gonna go. So that they can have a little more certainty when they talk to their board. This is what we need to pay for. And it makes sense.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that then, that, this is one of the more urgent items that you're gonna have on the list.
I think it is.
It is, it impacts a large part of the commerce in the city.
Okay,
And it impacts a lot of people that
That's-
work here and live there.
and you're working on the other important items for now as well?
Oh,
For
yeah.
the next meeting, right?
Right. You know, there's
Okay.
some roads that we have that will have very little we have to do to improve them. For instance, we're looking at the road behind the fire hall,
Mhm.
bringing it up from gravel and paving. Nobody's gonna have an issue with that, most likely.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of engineering to do there. It just has to have the base corrected and a surface put on it, and then it's
Yeah.
paved road.
And I see that you're even considering having two bonds, one for the 2025 and one for 2027 to help with the impact on the levy.
Right.
So the next meeting, you might be able to get pretty well a good idea,
I'm
maybe?
hoping to,
Mhm.
right now, Joe's out on a medical, and so when he gets back, we'll take a harder look at this. I have some ideas of my own as far
Okay.
as what the priority should be, and if he confirms that, and that's how we'll move forward as a suggestion to this group in the council.
Okay, and then it looks as though you're looking at drainage and widening, all those issues. And you'll come up with that in the next, hopefully.
We are employing the road standard everywhere that we're working on, and that
Okay, good.
includes Grandview. So-
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Tom, how far down, when you talk about that, the 2025, 2027 bond, how far down your list does that take? You've got roads that really need improvement today, right? So how far down between those two cycles of construction down your list does that go? What does that take care of? Like in January, we talked about currently 9 miles of roadway could be proposed for this 2025 bond
Mhm.
with 7.75 being absolutely necessary. Is that taking care of that 7.75? Or is that going beyond that?
Right now, I would say I'm dividing the roads based on complexity, so roads that I could almost just employ Anderson Brothers to resurface, those will be up front. And the roads like Grandview, City Hall Street, where we're considering a roundabout,
Mhm.
anything where it requires more significant engineering, I'm probably gonna push to the second bond. It's not to say that they're maybe aren't in a position where they really need it. But because there's more planning involved and probably more public input involved, you know, anything downtown, there's gonna be more voices wanting their say. We're also looking at a downtown master plan that we're trying to incorporate into, say, City Hall Street, as well as a possible new pickle building. Well, where that sits in relation to the new City Hall Street hasn't been figured out yet, so as bad as City Hall Street is, I think, in my opinion, that should be right near the top. And unfortunately, with the planning part of it, we're gonna have to make it last at least an extra year or two to get into that second bond, most likely, if we break it up into two. Now, we still have the option to go into one. I don't know that that's a good option, after talking to, our bond, consultant, and so I'm leaning toward the two bond solution, but, mileage wise, I think it will break down to where we will probably do maybe more miles in the first bond. But the more expensive bond will be the second one, just because of the complexity of what's being done.
Yeah, Tom, I don't understand that. It seems to me that it should be done on the basis of what needs it the worst. There isn't that much to engineering that stuff. It's all
Right.
normal stuff.
So I get that. But there's some coordination has to happen. So the Grandview roads, for instance, and City Hall Street are, I would say they're not, if they're not half, they're probably approaching a third of the miles on our list.
I understand those two.
Right. And so the ones I'm saying that don't need much engineering will go right away. All the roads on this list were a high priority for their condition. That's how they were put on the list to begin with, is their age and their condition.
Okay.
Is there an option to get a bond refinanced if interest rates do drop?
Yes, I would think so. We've done it in the past. I think this building was one of them.
Yes, there is that option. Typically, at least in my experience, Tom may have other experience, but that's usually an option more for longer length bonds. Because if we have a 7-year bond, there's usually not a lot of opportunity to have that refunding back. But yes, if we end up with, just based on the numbers, we need to make that a 10 or a 15-year maybe, but I don't know, Tom, if you've had any
Well, you
experience
get,
with that.
look at the numbers, right? And it's just not real good right now for floating bonds
Right.
for a municipality.
I'm just, yeah, the only reason I bring it up is, if we do end up seeing the economy turn, and one way to stimulate the economy is to drop interest rates again, that might be advantageous for us to refinance if the numbers, look appealing, but I just didn't even know if that was an option.
Well, what I could do to give you a picture of what that would look like is I could take, say, that 1.2 million. Plus we have some maintenance funds that we may use to redo a few of these roads ahead of the bond, if possible. So let's say it was $2 million that I could find to redo roads right away without bonding. If that were possible, I could come up with a list of what roads could be done and prioritized upfront for that. And I could probably bring them back to the next meeting. I think you'll be underwhelmed by what that does.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's expensive.
But it's an option. I mean, if you really feel your hands are tied and you really do want to wait for interest rates to drop, at least you'll know what you can do.
No, I'm not thinking we need to go there.
I guess another option I thought of while we were dealing with this is, we hit to build that 1.2 in the first place, the council's been putting away a certain amount of money for that each year. You could make this first bond as small as possible. And then, but also increase the levy some as if, so that 1.2, maybe you make that much bigger by the time you get to 2027. So that way, if interest rates don't come down, you have a larger pot of money sitting there to build roads with. That's just a thought, something to keep in mind you could do if you don't want to pay interest rates.
So instead of one big jump like in your tax levy, you'd kind of step it.
That's what we did, when we started this cycle thing. We were supposed to ratchet it up a little harder, but of course, things come up. And it's an easy thing for a city council to cut, but we had been putting a little bit larger and a little bit larger amount of money away each
Mhm.
year, knowing that this bond was gonna come up. Well, we did result in having $1.2 million. Well, while that's not nearly enough, I mean, where would we be without it?
Yeah.
And so I think if we took a more aggressive approach going forward for the next 7 years, maybe you could turn 1.2 into $3 million.
Mhm.
In that respect, it's nice that previous councils saw that and started to put that money away. We're very lucky to have that,
Some
at least to
foresight.
have that amount. But to keep this moving a bit, I'm just thinking that from a timeline then for the first, you'll be working on this for next month, and then maybe we can talk more in detail at that point. And what it looks like here, you're having that for the first public information meeting for the 25 bond would be in May. And then the other for the 27 bond would be August or September. So that's the timeline that we're looking at then. Okay. And that should be fine to be able to get into the 25, to do the repairs for the 25.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, and I know that from what I've heard, since we're just going with bonding, it'll make it a lot simpler than trying to go with assessments for time-wise as well.
Assessments have always been the third rail.
Yeah,
Nobody wants to go there.
yeah. Okay. So unless there's a burning question or something,
I got a burning one.
go ahead.
What's the discussion on this building as far as what could be done to it or not done to it, or what's going on?
Oh,
So if you want to talk to it,
well, yeah,
what I can say to it is this. The council can agree on, fixing the most pertinent parts of the building, mainly like the roof leaking and some of the windows. Some of the structural items that are bad. Some of the other items that we had on our, should be done list for City Hall, there isn't total agreement on that. And so as far as I know, and Jenny maybe could speak to this a little bit more, there's no immediate plan to do a repair on the building.
I thought maybe they're putting a new ceiling in or something, get rid of the echo.
That wasn't even on the wish list, I don't think. You know, most of us are young and we can hear pretty well.
Yeah, it bothers me.
Oh, you went there.
okay,
Fair. No,
Okay.
you know, I mean, that's not, I mean, we could consider doing some stuff with that. I mean, there are things that the city did do when they built it to try to deal with the echo. That's why there's the soft surfaces behind you.
Is that it?
That it's a sound deadening thing, because they did have a lot of trouble with the noise, the same with the, you know, the carpet that you see on the walls by the switches was to help with the echo.
It really is bothersome, like when she's talking to the speaker, you know, at least to me.
Because what should have been done is it should have been designed like a lecture hall at a college. Instead, it's designed like a church.
Yeah.
Food for thought if we ever decide to build another city hall someday.
We probably have to worry about, but go ahead, I don't want.
okay, no problem. Okay, so any other issue at this point for that? Well, then I'd like to head into our next item, which is the wastewater INI study update and presentation. So if Tom, you could do that?
Right, there's, in that February meeting, there's a Nelson sanitation report. About that first.
I believe we have that as a memo that we received as well.
We're bringing up the quote for the INI, jetting and televising. So that cost of that was, while Kiki's bringing that up, I'll give it a minute here so she can take minutes. Yep, that's it. So it's pretty basic. What we're looking to do is all the, roads inside the road bond, we're gonna look at the sewer mains in there by cleaning them, by jetting, and then televising them to see, do we have a verifiable leaking condition in there?
What are those pipes made of?
They're PVC.
They are.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't, we still had any old clay. That's right.
All of our sewer was built in 1991.
Okay, so we're
So
well
we're
beyond that.
relatively modern.
Yeah.
So I think, this first item, and I also have a memo in here that I need to distribute from the city engineer, and I'll just probably pass it down and have it take one. Just recommending that we pass, or we recommend to the city council to pass paying.
This
for-
Nelson proposal,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because, you know, the road projects that we're looking at doing, we're expecting those to last 30 years. What we wanted, we were gonna do this as a representative sample for the sewer system as a whole. What kind of condition is this in? Because the sewer system was basically installed in 1991. If we can televise this now and they can tell us, oh, your system is in pretty good shape. We shouldn't feel, compelled to replace the sewer main at this time. And so we can maybe get a better idea of how much, you know, when should we start looking at replacing this stuff?
Is this 10,900 lineal feet, does that comprise the entire parts of city bonded?
Yes.
So that's a set price, huh?
Well, there's,
Per foot.
you see they leave, yeah, I mean, it's the bulk of it. They do leave themselves some wiggle room if there's unusual circumstances. But
Well, I think it's a wonderful idea, so I'd move that we recommend that the city council approve this.
Yeah, we need to have this, don't we? Because we have that question laying out there. So,
this is a way of confirming what I'm gonna be talking about.
Right,
next.
this
Yeah.
ties in with the rest of the agenda here.
And it also ties in with our road bond, so
Right.
it does do a lot of things
Yep.
for us.
I think it should be done as well.
So maybe just
Okay.
a simple vote mark of,
Mhm.
for recommendation to the city council.
Yes.
I'll second. Go ahead.
so we had a recommendation and a second.
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And anyone against? It's carried. We'll take that to the
If you'd been around when they built that.
council.
you'd do it more.
Okay. Then you have the month by month I.
Right side up.
Nelson sanitation, who that is? Yeah, well, I just went through that was.
Jeremy.
Sorry, I tried to save this so that. oh,
Does he
yeah,
do that?
pull it up.
Yeah.
Oh, he does. I didn't know.
Well,
that.
We'll just
He's
say this
retired
as
now.
a.
I didn't know that either.
This is the same one that we saw last month
Yes,
too.
it is. So,
Yeah.
If you look at that quickly, you know, you're seeing what looks like a correspondence between precipitation and the inflow that we get at our sewer plant. Well, as I explained last month, I think if I expand this graph on a month by month basis, it wouldn't be, the correlation wouldn't seem that obvious. And so what I believe the correlation is that we have a seasonal increase in precipitation. Obviously, it rains more in the summer, and we also have a huge increase in our flow as our population increases. Galen and I were talking a little bit before the meeting. You know, if you look at that graph and you see spikes in the precipitation, but they're occurring after the spike in the flow.
Mhm.
Well, that's the first clue that that's not an
Part of it.
accurate representation. And so
Right.
what I'm hoping to do with this is, the MPCA in their report had said that if we have a significant I problem and we come back to them looking to expand the sewer again at some point in the future, they would require us to fix the I problem before they would approve our next expansion.
Right.
So I wanted to verify that we don't have an I problem, and I want to be able to prove it. So I've gone through and I've given you just a snippet of the graphs that I've printed out so far, because I've done every month in this 4-year period. I've printed out. And so I'm still in the process of studying it to make the rest of my points. But if you look, and I pulled out the July for each year that we had. And what you can see is that we've had several precipitation events that don't correspond to any increase in flow. There are a few that appear to correspond with an increase in flow, but if you look a little closer, there's also spikes in our graphs for the weekends.
Yeah.
And so on Saturday and Sundays, we always have an increase in the flow. And so when we've had those spikes correspond with the inflow, it's usually on a Friday and Saturday. So I don't believe that pipes are in bad shape. I think what we're gonna find by televising is the pipes are in actually pretty good shape. And so that will verify. it.
That'll tell us more, one way or another.
Yep.
So you don't even have to worry about it.
Right.
So I intend to take all these graphs and the information I'm gleaning from that. I'm gonna put it into an executive summary that I'll share with this group when I have it completely finished. And then I will also share it with the MPCA so that they know that what we have found. The only, verifiable I that we have seen so far was, visible to us in December of this year. We had frozen ground and heavy rain. And so some of our manholes were flooded. And so we were getting inflow past these manholes. Now, there's a couple reasons for that, some that we can take care of internally. Some of the manholes were missing gaskets that they have that will help seal them up. And so we're gonna identify those and try to do what we can to seal that up, and we'll make note of that and see if we can reduce that to near zero. You'll never get rid of all of it.
Right.
We do have examples of citizens in town popping open manholes if they have water in their yard. It's hard to regulate all that.
Yeah.
But we do what we can. But I think what we can come from this is that our pipes are in pretty good shape and we're not seeing a huge I problem from that. I did have one of these graphs where we had gotten 4-inch rainfall, and unfortunately I didn't have time to produce that for this meeting tonight. We had a 4-inch rainfall and our line actually went down.
Yeah, there's no way if we have
So-
intrusion that would happen.
So, yeah, I mean, if we had an I problem with the pipes, I would expect it to be consistent. Every time we got a precipitation event, we'd
Right.
see a corresponding increase
Yep.
in flow, and I'm not seeing that, so. Covered all my points. So like I said, we have weekend peaks that are usually reaching their maximum on Saturday, and I've kind of shown that to you. I explained that we had some leaking manholes and we're gonna work on that. Going forward, working on this, I'm going to refine these graphs, make them uniform and consistent. And I'm gonna study them to see if there are any other I patterns, that might present themselves or flow spikes. I believe holidays will be another one that I'll find that will pop up. I wanna take a closer look at the individual lift stations for flow. If we do have any I problem, are they coming from a pinpoint source?
Okay.
And so that way we, maybe we don't have to work on the whole system. Maybe it's just one area of the system that's bad. And then, like we said, we're gonna do the jetting and televising to make sure the hypothesis is correct. And we'll go from there.
And then we'll be able to prove it with the with what we just, take
So
it
once
to
I get the
council.
results from that, jetting and televising, I'll be sharing that here. So
Yeah.
you can see it.
That should really be all you need.
Yeah,
If they do a
Yep,
good job,
yep,
that'll show up.
yep.
If there's a problem. And there may be some.
These are Friday, Saturday.
What's that?
There may be some, I remember, when they put the thing in,
Yeah.
and I was watching it pretty close when I was in town, being it's kind of down my alley.
Well, you know too, though, Joe, that our system was built in 91.
Yeah,
We don't have any clay tile.
That's
We're-
true.
You know, we don't have a combined sewer anywhere in town where it was storm and sanitary sewer. So we're ahead of the game that way. So the only thing it could be is fatigue, you know, from a system that's 30 years old.
Yeah.
Or, you know, possibly in some isolated incidents, maybe you had a pipe that was installed over a rock or something.
Yeah,
I don't think it's probably the pipes so much as where the houses connect.
Mhm.
You know,
Service
you get
connections.
some poor service connections,
Mhm.
which could very well be.
There might be a
That's
few.
that's where you get it, you know.
That's where you have gaskets.
Otherwise, yeah, the gasketed pipes. But you know, they had a bad leak right off the bat under Bishop's Creek,
Yeah,
that pressure line.
yeah.
Took them a long time to figure that one out. So they do happen. That was right when it was brand new.
Yeah,
So you weren't here then.
no. But you know, it's good for us to look at this every few years anyway, and
Yeah.
keep an eye.
Yeah, that's true. No, I think it's a real good idea.
Cause any gallon of water that makes it to the treatment plant, if it's clean water, we're still pumping it,
Yeah, yeah.
processing it, and that's
Yeah.
expensive. And
Yeah.
so-
In our case, we're pumping it quite a few times
Right,
in
so
some
the-
places.
if we can get water out of the system that we don't have to treat, it's for our betterment. That's really all I have with that right now. If anybody has any questions, you know, feel free to stop in and talk to me if you want.
Do you think this jetting and televising should be put on a maintenance schedule of being done every so often?
So we do jetting regularly. We don't necessarily do the televising, but usually we work with Files, our local contractor, for the jetting. But this was more detailed and they didn't have quite the capability that was needed for this, so we did confer with them before we went and approached Nelson on this, so.
What would be the average life expectancy of these PVC systems?
I don't know that for certain. I wish Joe was here to talk to that.
50
but I
years.
believe 50+ years, yeah.
Right. Okay. This stuff that we have is 50 year.
Yeah. so
And
we
I've
should-
heard some of it lasting up to 100.
Yeah. It's a plastic pipe.
Yeah.
And they have gaskets now, and it's so much better than the old sewers.
You know, UV is the biggest,
Yeah.
and it's all underground, so it should last very long time. So,
okay, well, thank you, Tom.
Mhm.
Then I'd like to move on to the last item, which is any member concerns or questions or reports? Anyone have anything?
I'm just anticipating the recycling center, that's coming up here, right?
That's true.
Yep.
I talked to the mayor the other day about that, reminded him that in May, council has a decision to make as far as are we relocating or are we closing? Right now, I think there's a pretty strong feeling among most of the members I've talked to that the site should close.
That's the way I was understanding it too, that the site will actually close.
It's just plain clothes up here.
Yep,
There's a lot of reasons for it. You know, we're losing county funding for the operation to begin with. The county's not participating in any construction of a new site if we were to decide to do that.
Yep.
And
and there's one other issue too, not beyond the recycling, is that oil tank that we have back there, the recycling for oil, that's handled by the county, was it?
no, John had that wrong last night.
Oh,
That is a private company. It's East Side Oil out of St. Cloud. Administers that for us. They do it, basically, they're getting the oil and they make a little bit of money on that, and so they collect that free of charge. The only thing we pay for is to get rid of antifreeze and oil filters that are collected at the site. So
Yeah.
that unit is self-contained. They can come up with a truck at any time and take it away.
So
Or
where
move
will
it.
that be?
Right now, when the council brings this up as a topic for discussion in May, my recommendation is going to be to operate the system through the summer. And then come September, we will begin working on, well, actually, we'll run it through probably September 15th or September 30th. And then we'll begin tearing it down.
They're talking about the motors.
Well, the oil part of it,
Yeah.
that can be taken away as far as I know at any point. And so when we
Good.
reach whatever deadline the council sets, I'll
Okay,
just
I thought maybe we
contact.
were gonna continue that.
We did talk about if there were any private property business owners who might like to have that at their site. Maybe it could move there, but I don't see it being on any of the city property going forward.
The other thing is everybody could just get an EV.
Yeah. There are more of these containers around. The county does have one at the, county landfill. I believe there's one by the county courthouse.
Crosby has one downtown.
There's one right by Woodseth.
Yeah, they're around.
Yeah, Crosby has one, they've had them for years.
If we could identify a good spot for it, I wouldn't be opposed to putting it there. The only reason, or I shouldn't say the only reason, but one of the reasons we don't want to leave it where it is any part of the recycling that stays there, if we close the rest of it, we're gonna get stuff dumped around it.
That's true. That's true.
And there's no good way for us to control it. Maybe it's one of those things where it goes away for a period of time and maybe that small part could come back somewhere in the city at a later date, but I don't wanna promise that either, so.
Might be worth approaching automotive repair shop, see if they want it there.
Sure.
I mean, that would make sense to them. It's right next door. They can.
Yeah. Basically, we have to break the habit of people recycling there before we can introduce it somewhere else. And I hate to say that, but unfortunately, you know, well, the city did, I feel, was proactive with that. We've passed a curbside recycling. So far, that seems fairly well received.
Mhm.
People that we've heard from about the site possibly closing are disappointed by that, but they understand when you speak of the economics of it, most people get that. If it was at all more reasonable for us to maintain it, we would, I think, somewhere, but also, you know, we didn't have a very good consensus on where to move it to. And so. I
So
think-
when would you close it, before summer?
No, so we'll run it through the summer,
Oh, you will?
probably most of the way through September. And then we'll close it promptly, I would say probably September 30th. And my guys will tear it down between September 30th and October 30th,
And I would
hoping to
guess-
have it done and gone before snow flies.
So you will have some signs up that tell people it's gonna close and so on.
Once the council makes a decision either way,
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
adjust the signage.
We already have a sign up saying that the decision shall be made, either move or close. But once we make that decision, then that final decision will be
And then there
announced.
should be, you know, a sign or several.
Yeah.
signs.
Mhm.
Put 'em
So,
down.
so any momentum that was made previously with, putting it out, you know, by the city's wastewater treatment plant, that's lost.
I guess unless, people contact their council members with a different opinion, right now, the council members I've spoke to, I feel would prefer to close the site.
Okay.
That's not an official vote, but I think, the big, point of decision for a lot of them was the council, or excuse me, the county
Mm-hmm.
saying that they're gonna end their funding.
Yeah. So it's not even on a list, you know, like what Jenny was going through, the infrastructure, possible infrastructure projects in the future.
No, I think if we would have had, more, favorable, response from citizens to
Mhm.
relocate it, I think staff might have been more apt to push or explore that a little more.
Yeah.
But I think right now we're not, we're not catching that sentiment from the city council
Yeah.
or most of the folks that we've talked to, so I think most folks are satisfied with our plan moving forward. A lot of who uses our current site are people from out of town, seasonal. I know there are a few people in town who do use it and will miss it, but it's not enough to justify the expense it would cost to build a new one and operate it.
When they have local pickup now and so on. it's
And there are
working out.
places they can take it,
So
if they choose.
there was no place to put it, that would be a different deal.
It could be.
You had to go to the county.
I mean, if we could identify a grant or something for it, I would certainly reconsider in a heartbeat, but right now I just don't have a good answer for paying for a new site.
So any other concerns or questions? Well, then, I just wanted to say thank you for, being flexible tonight, because, I will be gone, going to Japan this weekend, so I'll be gone for a little bit. So I appreciate you being able to meet this week rather than next week. I wanted to be here.
Bring me
So the
back
next
some
meeting-
sushi.
I'm sorry?
Bring me back some good authentic sushi.
I think it'll spoil by the time he gets back.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll taste very good when I get it back.
Put it on ice.
We'll try.
Have a safe
But,
trip.
Just for your information, then, the next council meeting will be, it'll be the regularly scheduled meeting of March 27th at 5 PM. So, okay, then, if it's all right, if there's nothing else, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're closed. Thank you.